Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
The next speaker is Andrew. He's the founder of the Financial Modeling World Cup, and he's going to tell you about the finals in Las Vegas right now.
Woo. All right. Yeah, thank you, Oz. All the way from Las Vegas to here. Who could have thought we could meet here, right? Yeah. So, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here. That's my first time on the Excel Days in Bulgaria, and I'm mostly known in the community by being the founder of Financial Modeling World Cup and the company that organizes the Microsoft Excel World Championships with the finals in Las Vegas last December, this December. But I'm also doing quite a lot of financial modeling, consulting, and financial modeling things. And one of the things is being an exam creator and grader for the Financial Modeling Institute. That's the Toronto-based organization that certifies the financial modelers across the world. Seems that they're going to become the leading institution, just like the CFA Society for the finance world. That's why I'm also listing those, credentials over here, just to make sure that we're all notice them. So I'm going to talk about Excel World Championship in the very end. That's going to be like maybe a 2-minute thing with a little bit of a gift to you here today. But today, the key topic for my session is how do you, what are the key rules of a good financial model, financial modeling best practices, and the main thing, where do we deviate from these? Because, it's a lot of different models. It's actually quite a lot of different standards across the world, and what works for one country might be considered maybe even not as good or wrong in another one. But I'm going to try to first take into account or more talk about the suggested features of a good financial model as per the Financial Modeling Institute. And I'm going to show some examples from our Financial Modeling World Cup solution models, the suggested ways to make solutions, to make forecasts. And I'm going to illustrate this with a few examples. So generally, according to the standards that FMI, the Financial Modeling Institute, is promoting and advocating across the world, and most of other companies they kind of follow suit, is that a good financial model should basically follow those key features. So the first one is it should be dynamic, and here I'm going to be switching back and forth from PowerPoint to Excel. So basically, I could also show some things. So yeah, like a dynamic model. So basically means that if you change one assumption, that flows throughout the model and gives you the updated answers throughout it. So just a quick background on this case study. This is a solution model for one of the cases that our participants in the Financial Modeling World Cup had to solve earlier this year. The key logic there is basically you have inherited a messy financials from a company. You're just being appointed as a CFO, and you have to make some forecasts and projections based on some very few data that you know. And the key exercise after you go through all those factors of the solution model is to see what's going to be the company value, what's the current value of the business, and of the equity. So the model follows through, and with all those big calculations, it arrives at the value of 548 million in this scenario. But what happens if, let's say, for example, they are able to negotiate lower unit purchase prices? So if we go to the assumptions page and change from $6 to $5 per unit, the whole number flows through all the models. So it goes through, sales are not impacted, but it decreases costs of goods sold. It decreases the amount of financing needed. It decreases the working capital, so you're less in debt to your suppliers, and so on and so on. So at the end, just one single change in the model flows throughout the whole calculations, and you see that like one little thing has increased the value of the company for almost $200 million. A bad way to do that is when somebody goes into the cost of goods sold schedule and says, okay, like we have unit sales projected for each month, so what's going to be our total cost of goods sold? It's this times the $6 per unit, and here we go. So this is not the way to do that, right? So basically, like you don't hardcode any numbers in the assumptions tab. You try to make them all on a separate tab as assumptions, easily changeable, so that the numbers follow through. Because next time you're willing to change anything, that's not going to change. The model is going to stay fixed, and you know, there will be no updates whatsoever. Next thing, the model needs to be flexible. It has to be, you know, very easy to expand, easy to make changes, and basically the logic there is that you have this model on the solution tab. As you see, I'm going to be grouping and ungrouping the things here. It has like a total of like 11 different sections. For example, somebody might want to say that, okay, I think that working capital schedule needs to be next to cost of goods sold and sales. I don't think it belongs here. I need to move it up there. So very easy. You just, you know, take the whole section, move it down there, down the model, bring this up there, and the whole thing still works, right? So then you can also expand the model, take the last year or the last month, copy that across to the right, and it's still going to work, right? So these are the things that a good model should possess. So it should not be made as a fixed standalone thing that's never going to expand and that's going to stay constant, right? Because there will be changing assumptions, there will be changing conditions, there will be changing time frames, right? Or changing, you know, requirements by your bosses, right? So they see, okay, like here, this is a good, very good annual model. So we see how the company performed in 12 months. What's going to happen in 5 years? At that time, you need to copy that across 48 months extra. And if your model is not prepared for that, that's, you know, a lot of extra work for you guys, for anyone. So also the model needs to be intuitive, so that it needs to follow the logic, how people think. So again, on the solutions tab, as you see, it flows through different let's say, sections. So we start with forecasting, like, you know, like foreign exchange rates, like inflation, indices, different features. Then we produce sales forecast. On that, we kind of to that we link the cost of goods sold. To that we link the amount of capex and depreciation. The more we invest, the more financing do we need. Then we also have to forecast the working capital schedule, and in this particular case, there was also quite a heavy calculation of foreign exchange you know, rates. So, because like in this exercise, the company was operating under 5 different currencies. And then all these data flow into the P&L statement that connects to the balance sheet, and those two actually form together the cash flow statement. And those get finalized under the valuation section. Sometimes people make different layouts of the model, so sometimes you will see that all these sections are being created in a separate tab. That's perfectly okay. Sometimes you will see models where the key financials are being placed up there on the very top of the model, right here, instead of being, you know, like staying down below the other, you know, support calculations. Again, that's a matter of taste. In my opinion, it's perfectly okay there. So again, this is a small deviation from those rules that we are kind of looking at. Another thing is the model should be transparent. So every time you're creating a good and a nice financial model, you have to remember that there will be other people and probably other modelers who might inherit it from you one day, other colleagues who might be giving you some support as you're working on that. If you start creating overcomplicated schedules, if you start building overcomplicated, parts of that model that are hidden or, password protected from your colleagues, that's not a good job. There could be some exceptions. Maybe some parts of the model are not being or should not be shown to the whole company that you work in. So you might get some sections, for example, like if you have sales schedules by country and you don't want to get that shown to, country managers except for their specific country, then probably you might want to create a separate report file for them or hide that part from them. But other than that, if that's the transparent model that's designed to be worked by the top management or to be reviewed by the management or the finance department, then basically you should be making everything transparent and do not hide any sections there. Here, one thing, like when serving as the exam grader, like every year, Financial Modeling Institute, they administer different exams for various levels of their, certification program. And we have to to evaluate models that people submit on various parameters. So basically, as soon as somebody submits a model where a section is hidden, it's already like a loss of some points, valuable points for getting a pass rate. Those, let's say, ungroups are okay because they're manageable, they're kind of viewable. They could be operated by an analyst as such. You also don't want to, overcomplicate things so that they're not transferable, with the only, anecdotal exception that I'm going to tell a bit later. But realistically, like, think of if you're the only person working with that model. Like, any changes, any problems with the model, that's extra work on your plate. If something's wrong, you're going to be responsible for that. So you might want to have some backup. If you go up the career ladder, you're going to probably get that so that your assistants could do that. If you're working or like go, outside of the company, then somebody still needs to be working with that model, and it has to be transferable to other analysts. Well, I've heard opinions by consultants that work with large companies that's the best way to, let's say, make yourself a decent living until the end of your days is to get a contract with a big Fortune 5000 company, create a huge model that only you understand, and you're going to be there with them forever. I don't buy that. That's not ethical, in my opinion, and I advocate against that. But there are consultants that actually go for that principle. So, a couple of tips, do's and don'ts. I don't think I'm going to try to switch back and forth for this bigger view, because just basically getting back and forth from PowerPoint to Excel. So the do's, quite clear. So a clear structure to the model, that's a 90% of success for your further modeling. So if it's not clumsy, if your data flow logic is flowing from one section to another, then it should be all good. If you're mixing some data like from one tab to another and that goes like a big mess, then probably you're in trouble. I would advise that before you start planning your, let's say, model, try to draw the connections. What are the sections? What are the key sections? How do they link to each other? What is the data flow? Are you going to be using like all the sections one on top of another, or you might be using the, each a separate tab for each and every section. And that's basically something like, that's a must. There is no deviation. You really need to have a clear structure for the model, right? So then it's quite advised to separate inputs, calculations, and outputs. What's going to happen there is that, like here you clearly see that there is a page with assumptions. So if you want to change something in the model, you're working with that, you're changing some numbers, the numbers that follow through the solution model, and you get all those different calculations, and then there is the answer tab. In that case, these are the answers for the questions that are needed to get the points on the Financial Modeling World Cup. In real life, that would probably be a dashboard for the management. That could be a report that's being, printed to PDF and sent over to key stakeholders, and so on and so on. Exceptions when you probably should deviate from that. Quite simple. Like here is an example. That's another file not related to the previous one. Back of the envelope business plan model. So like a very easy one, like what's going to happen if we invest 1.5 million into some project that generates 1 million first year up to 20% every year, and like what's going to happen. So here are the charts, here are the numbers, and if you want to play around, like okay, what if the investment is not 1.5 million but rather 2 million? So hop, and you get all the numbers already up there. So you see that the current value of equity is not really good, but still you get a nice IRR. What if your cost of goods sold are not 40%, but maybe you can get it down to 30% every year? Now you play with the numbers, and you see that all those outputs change right away. So as long as the tool is meant for quick decision making, that's a nice way to put them together. Maybe even in complex models, it might be nice that you get some charts next to the main input step. But that's more of an exception of, I would say, rare exceptions. Quite often, especially if it's a complicated model, you'd rather go for splitting, inputs, calculations, and the outputs. So, so basically, you would like most probably to centralize the assumptions on the same tab. In most cases, that's going to work. Again, it's convenient. So you basically go through the model, you fill in all the numbers, you see, okay, like we have the start date is like for year 2023, the inflation is going to be like 3%, the income tax is 27, our valuation is 10 times EBITDA multiple, and so on and so on. So you work through all these assumptions, and you get the numbers as the outputs. That's a nice way to work when it's a centralized model with one person working on that. There are some exceptions when, for example, let me show you a operational budget model. So this is a good example of our template for manufacturing companies that forecasts a company's operational, results on a quite an in-depth level, not just general, sales, top line, and cost of goods sold, and so on. So this is basically where you really go in-depth with planning sales, in-depth by products, with planning manufacturing expenses by line items, planning salaries by basically by employee or by function, and so on and so on. So in that particular case, when you have especially different people filling different tabs, it might make sense, and especially when they have lots of inputs, it might make sense to kind of deviate from the rule of thumb and go for, getting some inputs on the same tab. For example, here on the salaries budget, this tab has, it lists all the different employees and their salaries, but probably it's going to be HR manager filling this in, and probably that HR manager, he shouldn't have access to the other parts of the document. Maybe that person just needs to see the whole picture only that relates to themselves. So it might be a little bit tricky for that person to jump back and forth from assumptions to the salaries, so some part of these salaries could be left here. So again, that's a way when a deviation could be possible from the so-called rule of thumb. So another thing that's, again, that like on exam, it could bring you points away. In real life, that just looks good if you do that. I mean, like, the points would be away if you don't do that, right? So, labeling. It's important that every row, every section are well labeled, and you have also the units. In this particular case, the company operates with, like 5 different currencies. The main currency is dollars, but you also have, like 4 other currencies. And when you project sales, so these are like in local currencies, in dollars, in units, it's important to distinguish, like what's the unit in this line item, right? So if you don't do that, your model readers might be confused. Your model readers might be just getting some wrong understanding or wrong assumptions, and you will get extra questions for, not addressing this when needed. So, yeah, the column with units, it just looks good. It adds value. It looks professional. In most of the best company, or like big 4 financial models, typically this column is present. But it might be a bit time-consuming. So if you're not doing that, maybe that's the least of the sins that could be possible with not adhering to the financial modeling standards. More important is to label everything correctly so that you really can separate what's where you have inputs, where you have outputs, where you have opening balance or closing balance of debt, and so on and so on. Another thing is that color coding, like a key or a global accepted convention is that you use blue font or bluish, as you might see here, for inputs. And it depends on the way you design it, but typically blue stands for inputs, then black stands for calculations, and greenish, that's for links. So you will see quite a number of green line items or green numbers here, and the key goal for these green items is basically linking them to the assumptions. Why would we want to do that? And here we come to another thing that's called the repeat and link principle. I might be a bit jumping over the sequence in the slide, but the fact there is that basically it's not a good idea to get all the formulas linking to all those different sheets, all those different tabs across the model. Like a rule of thumb or a good practice is considered when you have the inputs centralized in the assumptions tab. Then on the solutions, for every different section, you just link the desired, let's say, variables to here, and then link the formulas. So what happens here? For example, we have the, we know that in the assumptions we have capital expenditure every month, 2.3 million, and then this is linked to this number times inflation up there in the flags section. So as long as this thing is linked to other tabs, the formula could just become too long or too large and difficult to edit. So the key reason for using this tab is it shows to the readers of the model what are the key parameters that influence the flow later on, and it also shows what are the key, it also allows you to basically make the formulas shorter, because it's not a good practice to have formulas that are like 5 lines or 10 lines long, maybe except when you're trying to get really a complicated formula for data analysis. But for financial modeling, it's considered to be not the best thing to do. So yeah, I've mentioned the repeat and link principle over here. And while doing that, I've jumped over the date calculations. Yeah, so basically you might want to automate dates. So here, as you will see, each column is labeled with a separate date or separate month. So you have period start January 1st, 2023. Then it's the period end of the month. And then every next date is basically linked to that first line item. Why so? Why, like, and it's been like lots of models I've seen that people just hard code the dates right there. What's the problem there? As long as you have to make it for the next year, you'll have to retype everything for the whole model. It's not a big deal here because it's only one tab. But imagine you have a huge model with various tabs, and every tab needs to be retyped, the dates. And at one point, you might miss something, or misclick, or just make a typo. And then you get all sorts of problems and have to look for mistakes in your model. So that's why it's really advisable that you have one variable for a model start date. You can play around with that, put like whatever year you have there, I don't know, like 2025, and the whole model flows from here, and all the dates change automatically. Yeah, another important thing, again, that's quite a common mistake that I see in financial models. Different sections, people place data in different sections in different columns. So imagine what happens here. For example, you have a sales schedule, you have monthly units sold over here, and then you have monthly sales by country, for example, like mixed by one row. It could be quite possible because, for example, what could happen here? We have an extra input here as price per unit, and maybe in the original version, this was one column to the left, and then you added this extra unit and moved this thing to the right. At that point, your model becomes unsustainable because you have a mix of different columns, and you might get yourself wrong in writing the formulas. So if it's the same month, it should be within the same column. A couple of deviations, like what I would suggest, if you have some balance sheet data for the 1st of January, move that one column to the left from the January sales and all the other columns. Treat that as December 31st. Because December 31st balance sheet, that's essentially the same as January 1st balance sheet, right? So ending balance of previous year, that's the starting balance of the next year. So what's going to happen there is that you're basically going to, otherwise you're just going to have no place for the final end of December balance sheet, and it's going to end in the wrong extra column. One way to deviate from this thing, from this rule, I could show right here. That's like a slight deviation on the valuation side. So here, the key question of that model was like, what's the company value at January 1st, 2024? And you have all the other columns for 2023. Let me try to put some freeze panes over here. So that would probably mean that you really want to put that to the end of the model, but then how would that section look like? Probably it's going to look not that good, and you will have to scroll back and forth quite far. So like if we were like exceptionally strict, that should go even one column to the right, and then like you look into that section, and there is nothing, and you have to scroll to the right. It doesn't make sense. So if that's the only parameter you have to look at on that part, what you need to do there, just make it, in the very beginning. So that's the final output, the ultimate output that you need to get from that model, and this is something that you really might want to put in front. And actually, this doesn't interfere with the key concept there, right? Because you see, it's not in the same column with other months, right? So essentially, there is nothing nothing else in that column, right? So you basically get to the, fulfilling the best practice, and at the same time, you're still get your model looking quite well. So, yeah, on consistent formatting, a funny thing here, like imagine, probably you have noticed that this model, like you have quite the same fonts and quite the same font sizes and everything across the whole model. But like quite often in real life, what I've seen, there is a section that's formatted, like in one font, and then all of a sudden there is a section like that. That's due to whatever reason, is different font, different formatting, different whatever. This doesn't look good, right? And this is not the way to go. So you probably might want to make sure that your models are formatting very much standardized across the board. So even if that's in a different section, it's still not going to look good, right? So you make sure that you're using the same font, the same font size. It might look trivial, or it might sound trivial, but this is reality that I'm seeing from people who are actually trying to get and who are working at some nice companies in some quite prominent positions, but they still make those mistakes. So that's something that's really important to adhere to. Yeah, setting the model to print, that's a bit controversial. So this model, I'll tell you honestly, it's not set to print, and the reason for that is that it's not supposed to be printed. So let's save trees, and as long as the only reason for the model is to produce correct answers for the Financial Modeling World Cup case, why would you want to print that? So you do that only when you need to, really put a written report as a supplement to a business plan to a bank or to some investment committee, then it's something doable. In other cases, you might deviate from that. And another do, that's a nice thing to do here, use checks and flags to show some critical issues in the model. So here, for example, you will see in the very end, next to the balance sheet, there is a line, a check that basically tests whether the assets are equal to liabilities or not. And if I accidentally delete some number from here, you will already get highlighted with red that something's wrong. And maybe even in most extreme cases, there would be like a highlight somewhere over here on top, like, hey, watch out, the model is not correct. The model is not working well. So these are the do's, a couple of don'ts, and then we go to the surprise. So I'll probably not gonna go into showing those awkward and awful ways to spoil a model, but I've seen models where assumptions are spread across the model, but that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is when you have this, for the same assumption, you have 2 or 3 different places where to input them, and they're not linked to each other. That's bad, because when you change a number, later, it only changes part of that model. So you do not have to repeat the same assumption. So as I mentioned earlier, you don't type in the dates, you'd rather automate them. Never hard-code assumptions directly into formulas. So you really want to make your model flow, you want to make it dynamic, you really want to make the model flow fast. A rule of thumb, don't use too long formulas. Do you know what's the rule of thumb? If the financial modeling, the formula should not be longer than your thumb, right? It couldn't work always in complex calculations, but can anyone guess what's the most complicated function I'm using here in that model? Index match, exactly. What's the second most complicated? If, just if, that's it. So really, to become a good financial modeler, you don't really need to know all those very advanced models. You really need to know have good financial knowledge and good logical and analytical thinking. Which doesn't mean that I don't know advanced formulas. Actually, I do. So, yeah, don't hide columns or rows. It's okay to group them. And, you know, like a final thing, like never ever use helper cells like white font on white background, right? So if, for example, you like here, those, like, for example, these are the helper cells that help calculate inflation here. So I've seen a lot of models where people just went to, you know, these are just helper cells. I'm going to make them white on white. So that's, you know, they don't interfere a lot. And then imagine somebody else overtaking the model and just deleting them all the way through, because these are clean numbers. They don't really notice that. So this is like a never, ever, don't do that. Okay. Yeah, for color coding, I mentioned like blue for inputs, black for formulas, green for calculations. For the red, there is still a discussion going on worldwide, whether we use that to reference external links or whether we use that to highlight a formula that's different from other formulas in the same row. I don't really, or sometimes you use that for, you know, just to show the negative numbers. So honestly, I'm undecided myself. I'm more towards using red font just for negative numbers. Here is the general framework for financial modeling. So that's how your model structure should flow. You start with assumptions and inputs. Then you go through all those different supporting schedules. So in that particular model, you had to calculate revenues, cost of goods sold, OPEX, CAPEX, all those types of things to arrive to the statements, P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow. And then you get the outputs. No dashboard in that case, but you still have the summary output from the file. And finally, as we approach the final part of that, of my presentation. So I just wanted to mention that, we organized the Microsoft Excel World Championship, supported by Microsoft, graciously giving us their name to use for that. The finals take place in Las Vegas last year, this year as well. And every month we have online rounds, online qualification rounds. So the next online round is tomorrow, by the way. Tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Bulgaria time. And if somebody wants, we have 50 free places for the participants of Bulgaria Excel Days. So use the discount code for 100% discount, Bulgaria. And you can register on our website, fmworldcup.com, but that's going to be the easier way to get there. bit.ly and Bulgaria Excel, just don't forget to capitalize B and E. So that's a fun thing. That's really a fun way to learn Excel. So I hope, guys, you're going to love it. I think I've ran out of time for questions, right? But I'd love to answer them.
Thank you, Andrew. So,
thank you, guys.
Any questions? Any rules you're breaking, but he didn't mention? Of course, in Excel.
Yeah?
Oh, over there.
Yeah. Over here.
You got a question?
I just want to say something because many of you don't realize it now. But this presentation is probably the most valuable you will have. I don't underestimate the other fabulous presentation we have. But believe me, if I have seen this presentation 15 years ago, I would have much less white hair on my head. That's the truth. What Andrew said is completely transferable to all reports, analysis, presentations, whatever we are doing in finance, I'll say. So I really want to receive this deck, and I'm looking forward for the video.
Perfect. Thank you for the great words, and it's definitely going to be available for everyone here. Thank you, guys. So sign up, fmworldcup.com, and see you in Las Vegas.
See you in Las Vegas.